Hello everybody, I'm Len Santalucia, and along with me here today is Dr. Bob Dahlberg. He was a teacher assistant for me in the class we taught this spring here at VCU, and here's some of the students that we had. And it was a very, very interesting experience. First time I ever taught a class at a college, and I couldn't have asked for a better class of students if I picked them myself. They've been really great to work with, and I think we've all become very nice friends over the last semester. It ran for the spring semester here at VCU for about 16 weeks, and I didn't find out about being asked to do this class or teach this class until about 10 days before it actually was scheduled. And I didn't have a syllabus, I didn't have anything, and the only thing I can think of, because I don't know if they were testing me to see if I would refuse, but I wasn't going to refuse because we've been working very hard, especially Bob and I, to get mainframe on the curriculum here at VCU. So we grabbed onto the IBM Z zXplore learning platform. You can see what that is all about online. But before that, Bob and myself would run something called Master the Mainframe Days here for the last few years. And we always had very good turnouts. In fact, Joe, who you'll meet here in just a minute, has been in those, I think Andrew too, right? You were at some of those Master the Mainframe class, but they were only just one day, and they never could complete all 3 badges that are part of that course because it's just too much for one day. So we really knew that there was time to get something on the curriculum here, and it was with help with Anita, who was part of the team behind that got us on here. It worked out very well, and I'm very glad that we did it. We did it in such a way where the students would earn their credits, okay, towards their degrees, but that wasn't the main thrust behind this. I really wanted them to learn and get the badges, especially the advanced badge, because that's what would be able to be attracted to potential employers, because most people that see in the employers that they earned that badge, they knew they were good prospects for hiring. And so that worked out well. So we really worked it from that perspective. The byproduct was a grade and getting some credits towards your degree. I was more interested in those badges so that you really get connected with employers. And one other thing that we did is we had a person every week from some mainframe shop that I knew somewhere in this country present almost every week. Not every week, because we had some work to do in some cases, but almost every week. We had Bank of America, we had M&T Bank, we had Sono, we had 21CS, who was here today as one of the vendors. We had Depository Trust Clearing Corp. They all spoke from their perspectives on what it's like being in a mainframe shop, what it's like working in a mainframe shop. And then one other thing, again, because of the lack of time to prepare, I offered to take as many of the students who could work it out with their personal schedules to actually go to Share. And a couple of the students who are here today were there, and they'll probably tell you a little bit about what they learned from going to Share with me and what networking they were able to do and all that stuff. I'm not going to say anymore because I don't want to take away any of their thunder. So that's setting the table here, all right? See how this all occurred. Now let's get going with the things that you're all willing and came here to see, and that's the students. I'm very proud of every single one of them, and I'm very happy to have made an acquaintance with them. At the end, I was able, with Anita Taylor's help, to put together a little banquet at the end. And we got together and had some, Italian grandpa, you got to break some bread together, right? It's all part of this very important piece. And I even brought my wife Linda to meet all of these guys. In fact, they talked with her more than they talked with me, which is understandable. And my wife later on, who was a very good judgment of character, said, you have a really good group of students there. I said, I know, that's why I kept trying to tell you. And I'm glad you came to see it. And she enjoyed their company immensely. In fact, Jacob here's mother goes to the same hairdresser as we found out as my wife. They were sitting next to each other, and how somehow came up about from Jacob's mother that she was going. He was talking about this class he was taking, and he goes, "My wife says it isn't by chance my husband, Professor Santalucia." Yeah, so see how things happen in the small world we live in. So let's get started. Joseph, are you ready?
Yeah, I am Joe Vinson. I am a computer science major looking to graduate spring of 27, and I am currently contemplating getting a Master of Public Administration.
I'm Timmy Ojo. I'm graduating spring of 2027. I was one of the students but was able to attend show, and I'm really interested in product development, and I'm planning to pursue a master's degree after I graduate.
My name is Victoria Castagnola. I'm also a computer science student here at VCU, as you'll probably notice. I've already completed my minor in business, and I graduate in December with my undergrad. May go back for my master's, have not decided yet. Going to try to get a job first. I also attended SHARE. That was a very last-minute decision, as are many things that I do. Sorry, computer science. Actually, one of the things I told Len, and I'm glad it worked out the way it did, one of the things I told Len when I joined his class was that, I forgot to drop this class after the add drop period. That's the only reason I took it. Keep in mind, this class was 7 to 9:40 p.m. on a Wednesday, which he had to do that to himself too. That's how you tell he's a workaholic. But anyways, it worked out really great. The class was amazing. I'll pass it off.
Thank you. Yaksh.
Hi, my name is Yaksh. I recently graduated in May of 2026, this last month. And I'm currently looking for jobs in stuff such as like IT and mainframe as well because of this class, honestly.
I'm Andrew Nelson. I'm a master's student at VCU. I graduated this spring as well. I'm in the accelerated master's track, so I'm going to graduate again this upcoming year in the spring. I really enjoyed our mainframe class. I thought it was, it opened my eyes a lot to what mainframe actually was. Like you hear people say like, let's modernize the mainframe, let's like mainframe this, mainframe that. And it doesn't really give you a good sense to what it actually is, and it helped put it in perspective of what it actually was, and I really enjoyed learning about it. So,
I'm Jacob Parda. I also graduated undergrad this May, and I'm also doing my master's from the accelerated master's track. So still looking for part-time and internships. I enjoyed the class with Len as well, and I had originally met him during the IBM days that you had talked about earlier.
All right, my name is Jacob Gray. I just also recently graduated this past May. I am packing and leaving on Saturday for my new job, so you got me today, and you might never see me again. So hopefully you do. Thank you. But yeah, this was something where I'd gone to an IBM Z day. I think I went to 2, maybe, and it was a great experience. Just kind of learn about something that I personally was super unfamiliar with, but I just saw like how impactful of an industry it was and how many career paths there were. So it's something where I just, figured when I saw the class come up, it would be a great opportunity to learn in an environment where you have great mentorship, as well as the opportunity every week we'd have somebody new give you a different perspective, what their career was like, what their learning process was like. And that was really helpful to kind of figure out all of the different fun little acronyms and everything you get with mainframe. So, yeah.
Bob Dahlberg. I'm a retired associate professor from VCU. Before this, I was working for the Federal Reserve, and before that, computer associates. I was ACF2 development manager for many years. And I got to tell you, the reason why mainframe gets into university curriculum is not because of the administration or the professors. It's because of students. I've been teaching here 4 years as an adjunct, 8 years as a full-time professor. This is the first class that I had that only had 20 students. My normal class size was over 100. And these guys were all engaged. Now, Len was saying that we did master the mainframe for a number of years. And we would have, on average, we do this maybe twice a year, we'd have up to 79 students on a Saturday here trying to learn, and I would get people from industry. I think one time I counted 600 years of mainframe experience in the room mentoring these students. So I can't tell you enough that the reason why mainframe gets educated is not because of universities. They're afraid of mainframe. You think it's antiquated. They've got to learn new stuff. The students, though, they're hungry, and they're the reason why courses like this work.
And I have to say that, let me ask any of you if you can ever get a PhD to be your teacher's assistant. How do you like that? He was great. He did a wonderful job, and I do everything with Bob as much as we can. So, why don't we start off with some questions? You guys ready? All right. Let's try it this way. I'll say a question, and then we're going to also have the audience that's here today ask you any kind of questions they would like eventually, okay? But we'll start off with a couple we picked out, and Bill helped me put together. What motivated you to enroll in the IBM zXplore course, and what were you hoping to get out of it? Anybody want to go first?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I stumbled into like the whole mainframe industry very much on accident. It was the 2024 VM workshop, and I hadn't started any college classes yet. It was the summer before my first college classes, and I got an email saying, hey, you're a VCU student, you get a discount on this, you should come. So I came, I saw the name and I was like, ooh, VM workshop. I like Linux, I like VMs, I'm going to know all about this. Knew nothing about this, and thought it was really interesting. So I kind of, piddled around how I could, and upon seeing that, the zXplore class was an option, I was like, okay, nice. I really have to take this. It's the only class that's really offering any information related to this. And so, yeah, now I'm here, 2026, VM Workshop, having taken this class.
Yeah, I can take it from here. At this point in time, or at that point in time when I was registering for my classes, I was getting a bit bored of my degree. And I was thinking, I need to take something to spice it up. So I saw in my email that there is an IBM zXplore class once a week on a Wednesday where you get to meet industry professionals. And I was thinking, okay, this class I know for sure is going to be extremely interesting, and it might lead me to doing something different. So I decided to take it, and I'm so glad that I did, because now I'm full-on mainframe enthusiast.
Y'all already know I didn't remember to drop the class. That makes me sound lame. The reason I stayed in the class, one, Len brought in a ton of connections. Everyone was like, oh, Len, you're so set. And I was like, yeah, whatever that means. Okay. Now I know what that means. The whole, I promise I won't insult him the whole
It's
time.
okay, I get back. He knows it too, I get even.
True. But now I know what that means. My dad had always told me, make connections. Don't just, obviously work on your technical skills too, but make connections. That's also why I pushed to go to share and everything. That's why I try to be so involved in the class and ask questions to all of the guests that we had. So I definitely really enjoyed it as it went on.
And we enjoyed you.
But you know, the person who got the most jobs out of this course was Len. He came in retired, and by the time he left, he had 3 jobs.
Sometimes it's like he'd call off class and he'd be like, "Hey, I'm going to a conference. I'm going to go consult people, and go work on your badges by yourself."
So Len really led by example.
What do you think, Yaksh? Want to dig into it?
For me, what motivated me to take the class was the IBM days, actually, the ones you hosted. And then honestly, like Timmy said and Victoria said, I got the email as well and just saw that it perfectly fit in my schedule. So I was like, I want to learn more about this. And all the other electives, I feel like didn't really correspond to what I wanted to do at the moment. So I was like, let me learn more about this. Let me take the class. I had the class, it worked perfectly into my schedule. And honestly, I was like, if anything, I'd learn more from it. I had nothing to lose taking the class as well. So I took the class, and I actually ended up getting more than I thought I would from it. I learned all these skills, learned some skills I thought I'd already learned before, but found their voice so high that I'd say it. And then also just met all these different people on the speakers you'd invite, and then just learned from them as well.
I feel like this class gave me an opportunity to learn about a lot of different systems. So you can learn about Mac OS, any Linux distribution that you want to learn about in Windows. And I feel like if you just learn about one operating system or one system, then it gives you the idea that software is a monolith, and that the way it's done in that operating system or whatever system you're using is the way it has to be done. And I feel like it's good to get a lot of different perspectives. So I feel like learning the way that IBM ZOS, IBM does things is important to compare and contrast against other systems to expand my knowledge and also just become a better computer science student in general. So
For me, it was probably a combination of one with the IBM days. I really enjoyed talking to Len and Bob, and they kind of that was actually the first time I'd ever heard of IBM at those days. So I kind of was more wanting to learn more. And another part of it was I saw it was 2 hours, 40 minutes. So I was really curious what was he going to fill the time with. And I was curious if it was going to be connections. Doing the badges, it couldn't take that long. But it definitely ended up being a lot of connections, which I enjoyed. And just kind of learning more about IBM in general and kind of the history of IBM and figuring out that it's a very good career pathway. So,
Yeah, I think for me, I'd gone to some of the IBM days, but I think I was kind of positioned where I was looking at the current market for computer science and realizing there's not a lot of stability in a lot of different positions. If you want to look at database administration, which I want to do, or software engineering, that's changing a lot right now. And with IBM, with the zXplore program, I saw the mainframe, which has been in the industry forever and will continue to be so. And I thought, what a great opportunity to not only learn something new, learn something where you get great hands-on experience, because almost all of getting the badges and everything, eventually you're working with 3270, you're submitting JCL. I felt that learning process, I felt like I was doing something, you're actually interacting with the system, interacting with what you're going to be doing, if you were to get a job, this is what you would be using. And so that combination of knowing that this is a technology that's here, a technology that's growing, a technology that more people are using, but also something where I expanded my horizons, I challenged myself to learn something new was really cool for me. And I really enjoyed that process. So, yeah.
Bob, did you want to comment about that question at all?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, one of the motivations for using zXplore was a couple of reasons. Number one, in my tenure as a professor, I always thought that just getting a bachelor's degree wasn't enough. These students ought to come out with some certifications and give them a leg up in their career. Now they can start the advanced ones. The second reason is it was thrusted on Len last minute to teach this thing, as he said. The fall before, last fall, I was in Outback Steakhouse, and my server said, "Dr. Dahlberg, is that you?" And it turned out it was one of my former students as a server at Outback. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I couldn't find a job." And that's been the trend in computer science at VCU now, is that computer science students aren't able to find jobs the way they were. So I invited him over to my house, and for 3 days we worked on zXplore, and he got 5 certifications. In the spring, he got a job offer from IBM. He's now working for IBM. And I thought, well, let's give him not just the theory, but let's give him the hands-on. And then, of course, Len then gave him the contacts and some industry professionals. I thought it was the course that I always dreamed of teaching. And fortunately, the two of us were able to pull it. And mostly it was Len.
I think it was Len.
The contacts. And he says he had people coming from all over the U.S. I think he had a speaker from Germany and one from Brazil. Yeah.
Yep.
So it was worldwide. So
Yeah.
it was a great opportunity, a great experience for all of us.
Thanks down to Brazil we had. I forgot about them. Yeah, cool.
Can I tag on?
Yeah,
there's
go,
been
please.
okay. So there's been like a lot of discussion on, these opportunities and these tools for learning. One of the things that my biggest gripe with, I don't know whether it's VCU or how computer science is taught at the moment, but Andrew, you touched on this about how it's kind of taught as software as this monolith. I think it goes beyond that. It's taught as like architecture as a monolith. I think there's like one class where they even talk about programming on ARM. Everything else is like this, incredibly like x86 centric vocabulary. And so I was talking to someone that I knew, and I was asking, what's the difference between an LPAR and a partition in x86? And he goes, which partition in x86? And I'm like, what on earth? Why is there multiple? Why isn't there just one? And I really wish, in the same way that like foreign language classes will kind of teach you the different ways that languages can not just prescribe words to things, but also like think about how words are prescribed, like almost a step back from that. One of the things that I don't know, I either need to find or I need to kind of work for myself is like a set of Quizlet flashcards where it's like, okay, here's the word for this in mainframe, here's what they use it for x86, here's what they use it for ARM, and just have all of that, because I feel like that's something that just no one has really done. Because I was talking to Velocity, and they're like, oh yeah, when we hire you, we start you off with like all of this training. I'm like, well, I thought college was supposed to be the training where I learned the basic vocabulary and like what I'm actually working with, but you roll with it.
Let me put it this way, in industry, we have that problem constantly.
Yeah.
When I talk amongst other people within my company, and I go, I'm talking about disks, I'm talking about, memory,
Yeah.
storage. Yeah, it's not just coming out of college. It's
Well, and you got to remember that going to college and getting a degree in the college, that's just taking off from the carrier. That's not the mission. And when I graduated with my degree in computer science, I was 5 years in industry that I really learned ZOS internals. I mean, my real education came after I left the university.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to keep learning, don't get into this profession.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Timmy, what do you think?
I think I'm going to add on with what Bob just said. If you're not somebody who's able to just continuously learn, just like not just within technology, but in other aspects of your life, you will fall behind. And the ability to be somebody who's curious, a positive attitude, somebody who's willing to adapt to change and not always stay in the same way that I've been doing it, but be somebody who looks to innovate, create change, and do something differently, but it's already been different than something that's already been done before. I think those are the people who are going to find the most success, after college. And as long as you're positive, optimistic, continuous learner, you'll find success in whatever it is that you want to do.
Anybody else want to make a comment? Victoria? Anybody want to add on to anything?
It's dangerous to ask me another question.
We don't need to go through the whole line each question.
Yeah, probably there's a lot of questions, isn't there?
No, we're not going to go through all these.
Makes me
They're
feel
more prompting than
Okay, all right.
anything else.
It makes me feel better.
There's going to be something that I have nothing to say for.
And if you want to continually learn, mainframe is something new all the time.
All the time.
Well, and it's like even beyond that, I feel like that isn't highlighted enough because a lot of people, like, you know, going back to the x86 thing, when people talk about x86, they aren't talking about the first computers that were made with x86 and running on like, you know, like some small number of megahertz. But when they talk about like, you know, mainframe, they're talking about the very earliest forms of the mainframe, like COBOL code that was written 40 years ago. It's like, what's
Still running today.
that's still running today, you know? That wouldn't on an x86, and like, what's with that double standard?
Mike,
Can I ask the students a question?
absolutely.
What do you see the
Let's go.
3270 interfaces?
Green screens. What do you guys think?
A 3270 is an emulator for like a terminal interface for a mainframe, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. For reference, I had an internship with the Supreme Court of Virginia, and I got to work with their system trying to move some of their COBOL code to Java, and I did have to use a little bit of a 3270 on their VSE system, and I basically taught it to myself by reading the IBM Red Books, which was an experience. Kind of going back to that, you know, different people calling different things different names is like, well, you have this group of computer scientists from the 1970s calling this one thing, and then you have a group of like, you know, mathematicians working for IBM calling it a completely different name because they have, you know, working for the same thing but different philosophical outlooks on life. Like, okay.
And for you that aren't familiar with the zXplore, you start out with Zoe interface. And for us old guys, that's tough to deal with because you're debugging Visual Studio more than you, and the application on Visual Studio than you are there. Later on in the certifications, they get to the 3270 emulation, which now makes better sense to us old guys, and it's a line interface, right? So they got a taste of both.
Well, I think this leads to the next question I had planned for you here. Let me state what it is. What, if anything, surprised you the most about working with the mainframe during the class compared to the other platforms you already had been working with?
So for me, Zoe was interesting, I think, because it kind of was built after the fact. So it was, most of the things we've worked with are like, even if they're built separately, but they're built like fully around it, versus Zoe was more kind of, I guess, built for introductory, and then you have to kind of move to the 3270. So it's definitely interesting kind of figuring out how different parts of it could work. Like I know there's certain areas where you could issue commands, whether it's TSO and other things, but like the way it worked was different than if you were to just use a command prompt to type it in. So kind of realizing that a lot of this stuff is still kind of be a work in progress in some areas, but also other areas work differently than how they might in the 3270 and other aspects.
One thing that I noticed that maybe wasn't as strictly a technical element, I liked that there were more elements of history and math and everything that they brought up or that were mentioned in the zXplore course. And I also liked seeing that there's a lot of actual certifications and things and not just, oh, well, I did this class. That means something different at every college. You know what I mean? But with this one, you know, oh, 30 years ago, this is what we did. It still works with this. I was always a history nerd, so maybe that's why I liked it. And of course, you know, I've also taken like statistics classes or whatever. I was able to kind of blend in a lot of my other interests and see, okay, this is how it applies. And then I noticed, like, when I was at Sharon, of course here, it's not necessarily a huge, crazy assumption that everyone knows about mainframes or knows a lot about mainframes. maybe they're new to it, like a lot of us are. But I didn't realize how much the world relies on it. Now it's almost an echo chamber of your credit card transaction probably uses this or that. And I didn't know any of that. You know what I mean? Maybe to some people they're like, okay, well, now I've heard that. Now to me, hearing it, I'm like, wow, that's still, to me, amazing. Also because I want to work with it. So, of course, to me, it's amazing. But I really didn't realize how much it was in literally everything. I met people from, I don't remember what company, but some billing company that it's like, okay, yeah, all the bills in the world, like your online bills, go through them and go through the mainframe, and it was batch programmers. And I was like, I just didn't know that was how it worked before that. So I thought that was really neat.
Kind of tacking on to that, sometimes it can be an echo chamber of like all of these different services rely on it. You have flight control, credit cards, a bunch of medical information. The thing that really threw me for a loop, was hearing very, very different takes from different people that were right beside each other. So, like going to the career fairs at VCU, because we're in Richmond. Richmond has a lot of banks. A lot of banks go to the career fair at VCU. Capital One does use a mainframe. Yeah, but Bank of America doesn't. But then they both do?
Capital One migrated all.
Bank of
Capital
America's-
One migrated off. Okay,
They outsourced it. They still use it, but it's outsourced to an outsourcer.
Okay.
Bank of America runs their own machines.
Yeah, and it was so weird because I was talking to one of them, and one of them were like, "Oh yeah, mainframes, they're awesome. They're going to be here forever." And then I talked to the other one, and I can't remember which one is with. Help me. And the other one was like, "Oh yeah, no one's going to use mainframes in 5 years." And I'm like, this isn't helpful. I'm getting two completely different answers. Even if I average it out, like it's, half of forever, which isn't helpful at all. It's like, I can't get it seems like I can't get a
Joe,
straight
which
answer.
one do you think is right?
Well, in current present
Forget
company,
you're in a room with mainframes.
which one do I think is right? I think that mainframe as an architecture has the capability to go on forever. I think with the current status of fewer people joining it and a lot of companies worrying about using it, not because it can't handle their load, but because they can't find the people to work with it, I don't know how long it's going to last. Because I don't know if
I think you're spot on right there.
Because the main thing is, I think there's just kind of a marketing issue. Because part of it, not to
You've been saying that for how many decades?
not to be too mean, but VM Workshop really should be called ZVM Workshop or the mainframe workshop. It should be something that is completely solely linked to mainframes and not something that can be misconstrued. Because if I went to the 2024 VM Workshop because I saw the Tux penguin on the logo and I saw VM Workshop and I'm like, ooh, Linux, I love this. Well, and that's how you get you. I was the only student at the 2024 VM Workshop. That's how you get me, but how many other students do you get? There was me, and there was a PhD student wondering what he wanted to write on his dissertation, and it's the two very different perspectives, but also two students. It's as a computer science student, I'm not necessarily the one to be saying what the marketing decisions should be, but I can at least point out, the one that confused me, though I fortuitously came here anyway.
The problem is that I'm going to be 50 in 2 years, and the same problem happened when I came as a computer science student. The wow that you are experiencing, I experienced. It just happened when they started to behave as if everything wasn't sitting on this technology. So the question that I have for you all, you were born at a time when you're being told that computing is standing on an entirely different foundation. And then you come into learning from folks like this that, oh, no. The reason why this is glitchy, the reason why there's so many service packs, the reason why it's because they're really the second cousins and the third, fourth child out of wedlock of this technology. And I want to know, what does that now do to you based upon what you thought you knew about what you thought, what computing was really standing, what you thought was the foundation? Do you understand now why the ground was so shaky with those other environments, those other platforms, knowing where the real mother came from?
I'm going to give the shortest possible answer I can so I give other people a chance to talk. Teachers give COBOL a really, really, really bad rep. I've only ever heard COBOL referenced in a negative manner, which...
They don't do that to Java.
They don't do that to Java.
Java is an extension of...
I learned on Java.
And you only ever hear it in COBOL. And so you only ever hear COBOL in a negative implication, which then leads to, what do you use COBOL on? Mainframes. Well, that's the only way you're ever hearing about mainframes. It's this second-hand, wiki link from COBOL, which, all gets this negative reputation.
I can attest to the fact that, you brought up the monolithic thing, there's so much prioritization of things like Java, of Python, because they tell you, if you learn these things, that's what's going to get you a job, right? And it's almost completely ignored. It's almost like they treat this like some ancient text, right, that's forbidden for you to be involved in. I mean, I wouldn't have heard about mainframe unless my database professor told me in an after-school offhand setting, hey, this is an interesting industry, you should check it out. It never would have been in the classroom, it would never have been put in front of me otherwise, and then I came to the one of the IBM days and it went forward. In terms of a solution for that, I think that's why it's important.
Was it Dr. Leonard?
It was Dr. Leonard, yeah. I think it's why important, this class of VCU exists because now, you kind of take on the advocacy role to be like, no, there's so much important things that need to be passed on here. There's so many things that if we, don't continue this technology, to your point, you're kind of left with the scraps of what was really was the foundation. So, yeah, I don't know why it is that way. Even Linux gets treated that way, which is surprising to me because there's so many modern applications of Linux. But I feel like really, unless outside of 3.11, when were you ever taught anything Linux related directly through VCU? Right? Which is weird, right?
Okay.
There should be more emphasis on this because it is important. Even if you get a job you're writing in Python, you can't, freeze like a deer in the headlights when you come to something like a Linux because you're going to have to deal with it at some point. It's strange. I
have a follow-up because, we always treat you all as if you're babies, right? But really, we're handing the world over to you. So what do you plan to do? Based upon what you're hearing that's going on, it's been a problem of time. What do you plan to do about it?
You just put stickers on all of the transaction devices that just say IBM.
Or say, I was here, right? Mainframe was here.
I'll tell you one thing, all right? The onus is out there. It's not on the shoulders here. They did their work. They went and learned. They stuck their necks out with this class, put up with all my dad jokes along the way. Just for that, I gave them an A.
I think one thing they should do as an advocate is call 5 friends.
Yeah.
Just get more than
Well, I don't think it's...
It's more than that,
One of
guys.
the comments,
You guys got to hire.
well, one of the comments
Got
was
to hire these people.
who's available.
They're all available.
one of the comments
Even Jacob.
said Linux was
For the right offer.
Even Jacob's available.
x86. They don't really teach operating systems.
They don't.
in college.
No.
We have a class, but yeah, it's
One class.
yeah.
Even in the operating systems class, though, we don't build an operating system, we build a shell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is not an operating system.
You build a shell on top of Bash.
Yeah, on top of that.
Yeah.
So you're not building an operating system.
So where did you just build?
Rick's got a question.
Yeah, and forgive me, Len.
That's all right.
You like Linux?
Oh, yes.
You like mainframes?
Pretty sure.
How about building your own Linux on a mainframe? So when I heard you were with students, I submitted a proposal for build your own Linux, and it got accepted, so it's on tomorrow morning. And we're at a university, so it's like the first class of the day, right? Earlier. But,
If you have any coffee ahead.
And one thing I will add to what Rick said, they know about this because they saw it during the class. You guys know about the Open Mainframe project, right? And if you want to do anything with Linux or open source on the mainframe, you all can join the Open Mainframe project for free because you are students. And the university can do it too, including Bob. And there's a great place to be involved, contribute, whatever you want to do with this. Question?
yeah, a couple of people got anxious to close this up, worried someone was going to steal my question the second time. So you guys all talked about how you ended up in this class, and you all talked about what you learned and whatnot. What do you pointed out that we kind of have a marketing problem where people aren't hearing about it. What do you guys think is the solution? What do you think is the best way to get the word out to more people? Like, if you had to convince more students your age to look at mainframe careers, how would you go about doing it?
Any ideas?
Oh, yeah. First of all, talk about job security. I know that not everyone is going to say, oh, mainframe's super secure. Where else do your credit card transactions go? Like, it's not going away right away. You know what I mean? People mention AI a lot. People mention, especially, certain circles may be more critical of it than others. Maybe rightfully so. I don't know. I'm not an expert. But talking about, I remember one thing that stood out to me, at least initially, was the efficiency, and how much, at least in some use cases, how much more efficient, especially on a large, enterprise scale, Z17 is compared to, an x86. I don't remember the exact percentage, I'm sorry, but it was a lot more efficient.
What you're saying is if you had heard those kinds of things maybe in your college life or just maybe
before that, yeah.
or something,
yeah,
and that would have gotten your interest and drawn you into the industry maybe.
I think people are also, at least for me, I was never a super technical person. My dad kind of pushed me into it, and I would like to think that now I am since I've almost graduated. But a lot of technical people, the stereotype is that they're very quiet or they stick to themselves or maybe they talk to other very technical people. The language problem, I think, connects to this. If you're talking about 3 or 4 different words, people in the industry can't even, half the time tell apart, or it's basically the same thing. What makes you think that somebody that doesn't really like school, they're 15, 16, starting to think about what college they want to go to, or maybe they're in college, they're 18. What makes you think that they would actually want to do that? It seems so unapproachable, and it seems like everyone in that circle really isn't like that. I found that everyone's really nice now, but I think just making it the language more approachable and the very basic courses more accessible would be great.
All right, so we have one more thing, and you can incorporate this with what you were just about to say because I think this will help you. We'll start with you, Joe.
Okay. So
last question. What message do you have for this audience to take away today?
I can encourage.
I'd like all of you to answer that question if you think about it for a minute.
I can incorporate that very much into the thing I was wanting to say.
Good.
So I think kind of on top of the why, why is it hard for people to get in? I kind of like analogizing it, creating an analogy between mainframes and Linux. Linux, very popular. A lot of people know how to use it, but as we already kind of pointed out in this discussion, isn't really taught all that much in university. But then, okay, well, let's look at mainframe. Not as popular within, these kind of more kind of younger communities. Also not taught much in university, but still very much needed. And I think that aspect of, why is there not a community being built around it? Well, I think one of the reasons why Linux has such a community, one of the reasons what brought me towards it was just tinkering with it. And I think, people, especially where Linux is right now, a lot of people can start off in a very, very easy, very simple, very, GUI-based method of messing around with Linux. And then, once they're comfortable with that, they can start moving into some other stuff that, looks a bit older, kind of the stereotypical first thing you start to learn is, oh, let me start to learn Bash. And I think one of the reasons why Linux for so long was not as popular within just like the tinkering community is because, well, there weren't good GUIs that you could start with, and you would have to really start with Bash, and that kind of threw some people off. Now with the mainframe, it's kind of 3 times that. At least from what I've seen, is there just aren't as digestible ways to start with it. And you really do have to start with these very modern performing, very high performance features, but they're kind of behind this facade of a more antiquated system. But then it's like, well, that's what people are used to. And it's like, okay, now we're at a crossroads where we have this thing that like the people in the industry are used to using, but it's also creating a roadblock to people entering into the industry. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are loads of GUIs that are very applicable on the mainframe. We should let people know that. But I would say the main message would be mainframe, already great for industry and enterprise use. I would say the thing that we need to do for the mainframe is we need to make it fun, and we need to make it such that people can tinker with it.
So
because
you want to tinker with the mainframe.
I think once like there's just a simple GUI that people can like just, oh, okay, I'm going to start where this is digestible. I'm going to have a little fun with it. As soon as you have that, a bunch of nerds like me will be, okay, sweet. Like, this is easy to start. Let me start like messing around with it more. Because as soon as you have like, a pretty looking doorway, it doesn't matter how messy the house is. Like, as soon as you got your first step in the door.
Well, we're all technicians here. Isn't work a form of play?
I agree. You just got to get it. You got to give it a pretty face so that you got to think it's play at first. I would say my message is make the mainframe fun. It's already fun, but like make it fun for the people that don't know it's fun.
I think I can kind of tie directly into that with it's good to have it fun, but also I think just being aware of it in general in the first place, because I don't know how it works, at least on the more business side, like whether if it's only large businesses that are more aware of IBM mainframes, or if smaller businesses are also aware, or if it's smaller businesses only go through, for example, credit card companies, and they get their products distributed from there without even knowing IBM's involved. But just having a way that, whether it's putting logos on those transactional devices, or having it just so you see it throughout daily life, so that way the people that are naturally curious and be a good fit for mainframe to begin with will actually be able to see it. And if they're curious about why is IBM always seen on all these things, if they're naturally curious, they'll look into that kind of thing. They'll ask questions about it. And if, as he said, if it's interesting looking, then they'll get their hands dirty with it and potentially find that that's what they want to do. So I think just in general, ensuring awareness, not just with like large companies, but even people that maybe don't have anything that they directly interact with mainframe in general. Maybe it's just through credit cards and that kind of thing. Them being able to aware if even that mainframe exists, that IBM is a thing, is important.
Credit cards are fun, but credit cards don't bring people in. Think about it like Doom. People make Doom run on toasters. It's like, yeah, people make it on their mainframe, and it's like, people put like, oh, let's put like tiny Linux on, some like Casio watch. Like, that's the fun stuff that brings people in. Credit cards can bring money in, but like, have stuff that like doesn't bring.
Well, one of the things we told the students in class was we were talking about this conference, and we told them the mainframe society is a closed society, that you're going to find out that the older guys are going to want to help you out. We help each other out. And it's like belonging to a club. And that one of the things I would challenge is for the students here who are still in school, or even if you're not, talk to your underclassmen that are in there. Tell them about this stuff. Tell them about the opportunities and what it's all about so that they'll take Len's class again. Keep this guy at work, right? And I think for the rest of you, have an opportunity if you're coaching soccer, talk to them about it a little bit when you take them out for ice cream or something, convey to the younger people that this stuff is out there, right? I was a scoutmaster for 10 years, and I had kids from 11 years old to 18, and the 18-year-olds would come to the meeting with their uniforms in a paper bag and change in the bathroom. And the younger kids, their mothers and stuff were afraid, well, they're going into a Boy Scout troop where the guys shave. They're 11 years old. And I said, don't worry. Here's the thing. When they go to high school, their senior patrol leader is going to be the captain of the football team. And in the high school, being a Boy Scout, no one knew who they were except them. And they took care of each other. And I think that's what we got to do. I mean, right now we're kind of a secret society. But let's get some more members.
Timmy, one more comment?
Yeah, one more comment.
Yaksh, one more comment from you. Let's go with Timmy first.
I think the people the companies, the corporations need the mainframe talent should have a greater influence over the way our education or our courses are being created. Because it seems as if, it's the corporations need the talent, right? And if, these companies are looking for mainframe talent, were telling the people who are in charge of creating the classes, the courses, hey, this is what we actively need, we wouldn't have so many CS majors that are out of a job or so unskilled because they would have the proper skill set necessary. I mean, I think of what's going on with NIL. I think it's Illinois University professor, Jeffrey Decker. He's going through a situation where, just putting spotlight onto your situation. He's having people who are taking his class and are actively getting jobs at a consistent basis, and these are pretty good jobs. But still, the university wants to take it away because it doesn't fit the state's standard for courses, and it's absolutely unfair. So,
I don't know if it's that, it's just stupidity. Just plain outright stupidity.
How do you get those students to get the share?
Yeah, hold on.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You had a question or a comment?
Yeah, so all I want to off what Professor Dahlberg said, and what Timmy said, I think it's obviously not being marketed enough, but also I feel like a lot of a good way we could get it out is possibly clubs and stuff. I know Professor Santalucia, he also presented for the Linux user group, I believe here. And I feel like having more of a reach out like that, getting to students will not only help, but also a big thing personally I think would be good for the mainframe is having more really early career opportunities or really career learning opportunities from freshman on, because that's when you really figure out what you want to do within not only what career you're trying to get into, what degree you're trying to get, but you can also try to figure out, oh, let me try to focus more on this technology in general. And as you go on, I personally started learning about mainframe this year, so I had already learned a bit more from my previous internships or probably just my classes that I've taken before. And having something where I would have done this earlier on I would have had so much more time to focus into it and learn, oh, let me see how much I could branch out and get into it more, if that makes sense.
It does. And I wanted to say, let's close the session with a couple of comments. First and foremost, I wish you all the best. I hope I see more of you, and it doesn't stop here. You guys were phenomenal. It was great to have you in class, every one of you. Okay? And secondly, the message I have for all of you, hire. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.